When it rains, it pours. Now, Adidas released a huge piece of news yesterday, September 25th, about a shoe that we've been waiting for forever, the Adios Pro 4. Additionally, they released another shoe called the Adios Evo SL, which is a shoe that we've known about from leaks. However, we didn't know really what it was, and now we have a pretty good idea of what it is, and it's very interesting. Now, I've been wanting to talk about the Adios Pro 4 for a long time. We have seen leaked images of what turned out to be the final release shoe for months now. We've seen every possible view of that shoe, exploded views. We've seen all the angles. We've seen the outsole. We've seen everything about that shoe, but we didn't know two key details, which I'll get into in this video, and I'll call them out. But when we got all these details, everything was really clear yesterday. It made a lot of sense, and it's actually quite exciting about where Adidas is headed. When big shoe releases happen and the brand will send out a product manager or a VP of product, it's always really interesting to hear not just what they say, but how they say it, and particularly where they pause to think about specifically how to say something. Now, Patrick Nava is the VP of product specifically running for Adidas. He's one of them. And he's been the one really promoting the Adios Pro 4 in the Evo SL out there on YouTube in the various videos you've seen. There is the Running Warehouse video, and then there's the Believe in the Run, the Drop podcast with him, which is actually better because it's more recent. Link in the description to both of those. But watching Patrick speak is really fascinating because as a product designer, I have been in those teams, in those meetings where the messaging is created, where the talk track about how to talk about the features of the shoe is outlined and agreed on, and the areas that you're not going to talk about because they're proprietary or they're not ready to release because they're part of a larger conversation with the brand, those are kind of hidden in a way. However, when someone from that team is out there talking about the product in the press, they often will pause as they're trying to really collect their words and think about specifically how to say something without giving away some of the details that are going to come later. And in Patrick's two videos, there's definitely a lot of that. And I think it's really telling. And that's why I'm excited to finally dive into these shoes. Let's dive in with the Adios Pro 4. Now, in some ways, this is the less interesting of these two shoes. Not that it's not a great shoe and it's a huge update. It's a huge update. More that we've kind of known everything about this shoe and we've really known what to expect from this shoe. Now, when Adidas launched this shoe, the Evo 1 last year, this was a huge update in geometry, in how the shoe runs, how it feels. A big step forward for Adidas, not just in the technology, not just in the weight, but more in the feel of the shoe. Now, the Adios Pro has always been Adidas's marathon racer, especially with the Adios Pro 3. They specifically honed in on making that a long-distance marathon racer. And the design of the Adios Pro 3 definitely favored longer, steady-state type running. Where the Evo 1, with its more aggressive geometry, the rocker point moved back towards the midfoot, really made that shoe much more aggressive to run in, but also more versatile across a lot of distances. Not that the Adios Pro 3 wasn't, it was a great shoe, but the Evo 1 was even more versatile. It was getting into Vaporfly-esque territory that you could really race anything in it. And I think over the past year, we've seen Adidas athletes race just about every distance in the Evo 1, and it's been quite successful in all of those distances. So we know the geometry of the Evo 1 worked, and anyone who's run in that shoe, anyone who's had it on their foot, now I've not run in the shoe, but I have had it on my foot, it feels very natural. It gets you up on your toes much more naturally, and I can imagine running in it, it keeps your cadence up. It's just not quite as sluggish as the Adios Pro 3 was, with the rocker point kind of moved more towards the toes, which again is good for steady state running. But when you need to pick up the pace, it's not always the best. The Evo 1 was sort of a much more aggressive version of that, and it worked really well. So we knew that the Adios Pro 4 was going to have that exact geometry, and that's what's been confirmed by Patrick. It's essentially the exact same shoe from a geometry standpoint as the Evo 1. And that's a great thing. It has the rocker move further back towards the midfoot. It has that more aggressive forefoot. and it has that wider sort of forefoot with the waist that narrows in, but not too much, with that stable heel. It's sort of everything that was really successful about the Evo 1. That's not a surprise. However, what the team needed to do with the Adios Pro 4 was make it more consumer friendly, because the Evo 1 was really, as Adidas, as Patrick said many times in his interviews, it was the F1 car. It was the thing that there were no limits, no technological limits. They could do whatever they wanted with that shoe and make it work within the regulations. And they did that. They really pushed it forward. And I've said this many times on this channel in many videos. The Evo 1, I think, marks the next point in the super shoe sort of story. If the Vaporfly 4% was the one in 2017, the Evo 1 in 2023 was the one that really, we're now in the next chapter, and that's because of that shoe. So the Adios Pro 4 having all of that geometry is really spot on. And that geometry with more durability, because you have a more robust foam, and I'll get to that in a minute, and you have an upper that's much more robust as well, and it's going to hold the foot in much better. You're gaining weight, but you're adding durability, and now you're making a consumer level shoe that has all the innovation from the Evo 1, but at a price tag of $250 US. That is the same as the Adios Pro 3, but also it's palatable to the general consumer that's used to buying super shoes. I know super shoes are still expensive, but this is within the realm of where Adidas has been for their top tier super shoe. Now, the Adios Pro 4, as I said, does gain a little weight, but it gains a substantial amount of durability that makes it a shoe that's going to be as good for training as it is for racing. Something the Evo 1 wasn't the best at. It could do more than I think a lot of people gave it credit for, but it still wasn't a shoe that you're going to put in a ton of training miles in and then go race like you could with the Adios Pro 3. And Adidas knew that they not only had to deliver a performance-oriented update to the Adios Pro 3, because that shoe was so successful, so well loved, and it did so well over its lifespan, but they needed to put it in a package that was durable, again, had that performance, and was at a price that, a general consumer is going to pay, at least for that top tier of super shoes. That was not the Evo 1. And that's exactly what they've done with the Adios Pro 4. So if you look at this shoe and you look at side by side with the Evo 1, you can see the similarities across the board. However, the Adios Pro 4 now has a more robust upper. It has a tweak to the foam, which again, I'll get to in a moment. And overall, it's a shoe that's going to stand up to the rigors of training and racing for really any type of runner. Let's jump into looking at this shoe. So if we start with the upper, Adidas really listened to a lot of the criticism of the Adios Pro 3 upper and just how harsh and plasticky and stiff it was. Now, it seems like everyone had that comment. I spent a lot of time on this channel talking about how horrible that upper is. But the thing about that upper is once you got over the problems and the rub points and the lace bite and all the issues with that shoe, once you could find a sock or a Band-Aid or plaster strategy that protected your foot with that upper, the shoe was amazing. It did actually fit very well once you figured out how to lace it. And Adidas wanted to maintain that fit, but in an upper material that's not as harsh on the foot. Now, if you ever tried on or saw the Evo 1 in person, you know how soft that upper material was, but just how barely there it was. It's not something that can be in a general consumer shoe. So this upper is really a combination of a textile that is much softer, and a lot of the commenters and the reviewers of the shoe that have been running in it have said this, that conforms to the foot much better, but still gives you that lightweight feel, and it maintains the design of the Evo 1 upper, which is a much cleaner upper. The way the lacing system worked, the way the toe bumper worked, just everything about that shoe really just works, and it works exceptionally well. And as you can see here, you can see the weave of that textile. It's almost like a vapor weave from Nike type textile, though I've heard it's even softer than that, and it's even more conforming to the foot, which is great because vapor weave back in the original Vaporfly Next% 1 could also be a little harsh on your foot, but people that have run in this shoe have been telling me that this is much softer, much more conforming. It feels a lot like the Evo 1 upper, just in a much more durable package. They also have another system in here called the Light Lock system, which is a kind of band that runs from the toes, or really the base of the eyelet chain, all the way around the heel and then back again on the other side. And really that's meant to kind of really hold your foot in and allow the upper material to flex in only really one direction while maintaining and containing your foot in the direction that you need it, which is the direction of travel in the shoe. So it's a really smart system that allows them to use a very lightweight, conforming, stretchy material, which should be much nicer on the foot, still maintaining that lockdown that you expect. So the eyelet chain and the light lock system, along with the standard Adidas sling system over the heel, should keep your foot very stable in this shoe. And again, the reviewers who have been running this shoe have been saying the fit is exceptional. Moving to the midsole, this is where the biggest question was for me. So when we look at the exploded view of this shoe, you can see that there's multiple parts. There's an upper to the midsole, there's the rods, there's a lower to the midsole, and then you see the outsole, and then above the upper you'll see the insole. Now, it's a two-part midsole with the rods in between. Now, in the Running Warehouse video announcing the Adios Pro 4, which was recorded about a year ago, so it's kind of out of date at this point, Patrick was saying that there's actually two foams in this shoe. The upper part, which is Lightstrike Pro, the one that we know, the one that we've used before, and the lower part was the same foam that was in the Evo 1, which was a different foam from the TPEE foam that was Lightstrike Pro. Now, if you watch the podcast from Believe in the Run, which came out recently, was recorded much more recently, the team actually evolved that shoe from what was in the Running Warehouse video. So Patrick has now confirmed that the foam in both pieces of the midsole is Lightstrike Pro, and it is TPEE. It is the traditional Lightstrike Pro. It's the same Lightstrike Pro that we've used for a long time, we're very used to. However, it's a new formula. It's more airy, it's softer. It's not PIBA, it's not ATPU, it's a TPE foam, and it's what Adidas has really been sticking to. So a supercritical TPE foam. Just re-engineered, much more resilient. You do have sink into it now, and it maintains a lot of the properties from the Evo 1, but in a much more durable material that, again, as Patrick said multiple times, Adidas thinks the TPE is a better material for not only durability, but it gives them better resilience over a PIBA type foam. So that's what is actually in the midsole of this foam. A full Lightstrike Pro, new formulation, but full Lightstrike Pro. The Energy Rods 2.0 system is the same Energy Rods 2.0 system as what's been in the Adios Pro 3. However, the geometry is changed a bit because the rocker points move back, but you're going to get all the benefits of the Energy Rod 2.0 system that we've seen in multiple shoes. It's still here in this shoe, and that Lightstrike Pro foam, even though it's more airy now, it's softer, it still should protect these rods. So in a consumer release, the rods will be supported and they shouldn't break as much as they probably would have been in the foam that was in the Evo 1. So that was always a concern, and I talked a lot about that on the channel in multiple videos. I'll put a link in the description to a few of them that really get into that detail. Moving to the outsole, this was the other big unknown about this shoe, because when we've seen this shoe previewed, we've seen this sort of clear or transparent outsole in the shoe with one little piece of continental rubber, and it wasn't clear what that was. Is it all continental rubber? Is it something else? Well, it turns out Patrick has confirmed that it is something else. It's actually a CPU outsole. It's a cast polyurethane outsole, which is a much, much lighter material than rubber, especially continental rubber, and it provides most of the grip. Not all of the grip, but enough of the grip in a much lighter package. And since Adidas is going for a lighter weight shoe, they've gotten this shoe to 200 grams or about 7 ounces. It's still considerably heavier than the Evo 1, but it's about where it should be for this category of shoe. Now, that outsole is going to really do two things. It's going to make the ride of the shoe much more compliant, much softer. The benefit of a CPU outsole is that it almost feels like you're running on a rubberized foam outsole, but you're getting the protection of an outsole material. It's a very different feeling, I think, from what traditionally the Adios Pro has felt like. And it's going to take some getting used to from a few people, but ultimately I think it's just going to give you a more compliant, softer shoe that has more ground feel. So if the Lightstrike Pro formulation that's in the midsole of this shoe is more airy, more open, and you have the rods, which are fingers, so they flex independently with the foot, and you have a much lighter weight, more compliant outsole, that means the Adios Pro 4 is going to have a lot of ground feel, which is, again, something we've never had in an Adios Pro or really any Adidas shoe. Now, the Evo 1, even though I didn't run in it, walking around in the store in it, I did feel there was more ground feel in that shoe. But again, Talking with some people who run in this shoe, they're saying they do feel the ground much more, but it doesn't feel like there's no foam there. It doesn't feel like they're on the ground. It says they have more sense of the ground, better proprioceptive feedback, which is excellent. That's something I think Adidas shoes have needed for a long, long time. But Adidas is sort of admitting that the CPU outsole is maybe not as grippy as Continental rubber. Now, Continental rubber is probably the grippiest outsole that you can get on a road running shoe, so that's a compliment actually to what the material that they're using. But to make up for that, they're putting that little red piece of Continental rubber right under the toe-up position. And Patrick explained why it's there to really maximize grip where you want it. And I think that makes total sense. Now, having that extra grip on the toe-off is going to make this shoe, again, just feel much more propulsive, more aggressive geometry. It's just going to keep rolling you off the foot. Additional toe, like ground feel and ability to feel where your foot is in space is just going to make this shoe a much more enjoyable ride. It's going to make it much more versatile. It's interesting because this shoe is no longer specifically focused on only the marathon. It seems like they're really trying to focus this shoe around any type of running, any type of racing, which again speaks to a change in strategy for this shoe because again, the Adios Pro has always been specifically built for the marathon. This shoe is going to excel at the marathon, but it seems it's going to excel really everywhere else. And that leads us to this shoe. And this shoe I think was the more exciting one because it was the biggest surprise, the Adios Evo SL. Now we have seen this shoe in leaks called the Evo C. It had, I think it was just called the Evo at one point as well. It was just badged as that. And a lot of people thought it was an update to the Evo 1. But we've not really known what this shoe is. We didn't have any sense of what's inside it. And we didn't really understand what the purpose of it is. But now that Patrick's really talked about this shoe and it's really out there, it's clear that this is now the Adidas Tempo Trainer or Performance Trainer, or the word that I don't want to use on this channel, Super Trainer. And that is really interesting because there's a big difference in this shoe over a lot of the other shoes in the category and where Adidas has previously been. There's no plate in this shoe. And this is what's so exciting about this shoe. There is no plate in it, but it is their main tempo trainer for 2025. This is the one that's going to be the main shoe for all that performance training that will pair with the Adios Pro 4. And that's a big shift for Adidas because Adidas has gone in very heavy on their rods in every shoe in the category, from tempo trainer to race shoe. But now they're kind of going back on that and they're providing a mainline tempo trainer with no plate. And I think it's really great because it's a shift that I think the overall running shoe industry needs. And if Adidas is leading that way, I think it's going to take hold. Now, there's nothing wrong with training in a plated shoe. I train in plated shoes all the time, but I want them for key workouts. I want them for performance running, racing, really hard intervals, really hard running. I don't want to do normal workouts or kind of more easy workouts in a plated shoe all the time. So to have an option like the Evo SL for that is great. Now, Nike's already done this with the Peg Plus. We're going to see a couple other brands do this as well. But it's really exciting to see Adidas take the Evo name and put it on their tempo trainer and not put a plate in it. That is a huge shift that I did not expect. Now, we know there's no plate in the midsole, but they did say there's a midfoot shank in the shoe, a nylon midfoot shank. Now, knowing Adidas and how they do shanks, that could mean a lot of things because often Adidas shanks go into the heel, they go into the forefoot a little bit. Again, they made a point to say that there's no plate, there's no stiffening agent in this shoe. So I don't think it's going to be quite aggressive like we've seen last year in, say, the Adios 8. But there still is a midfoot shank in there, which is really there to control torsion and make the shoe not quite as torsionally kind of all over the place as it would be otherwise. So I think it's fine in this shoe, and I think the shoe will flex very naturally with the foot. Now, Patrick did confirm the foam in this shoe is Lightstrike Pro, and it's not the newer, more airy Lightstrike Pro that's in the Adios Pro 4. It's closer to what's been the Adios Pro 3 or the Lightstrike Pro that we've known for many years. He did say it's a newer formula, but it's much closer to that. So it sits somewhere between the two. That's quite exciting. Now, we've never gotten a full midsole Lightstrike Pro shoe with no stiffening agent. I know there's another shoe out there that was kind of shown in the Running Warehouse video. It's the Forbidden Red shoe, but it's not been officially announced by Adidas, so I'm not going to talk about it here. I will talk about that when we get official word and details and specs from Adidas. But the Evo SL at 33 in the midfoot, 39 in the heel, or 32.2, 38.7, with a 6.5 or 7 mil drop, depending on which specs you're seeing, makes it a quite interesting prospect. I think this is going to be a really, really valuable tempo trainer that's going to have a lot of purposes from easy running all the way into key workouts. And you're finally going to be able to do that in one shoe that doesn't have a plate in it. So you're getting the training effect of a plateless shoe with all of the performance materials that you would expect from a super shoe. Really, really fascinating shoe. A couple other details about this shoe. As you can see, the silhouette is very reminiscent of the Evo 1. It actually looks identical to the Evo 1, but the upper is obviously more robust. There's more material there. It looks like a combination between the Takumi Sen 10 upper, which is a great upper, and the same design language and engineering that they're doing with the Adios Pro 4 upper. So it should be a very good upper, and it looks like it's actually a little bit more padded in the heel and the Achilles flare, which I think a lot of people will benefit from. And then looking at the outsole of this shoe, this is a shoe that has that traditional Continental 4-foot rubber patch, which should feel great, especially with no rods or plates in it. And it has the standard rubber in the heel. So this is going to be a very durable shoe that's going to serve a lot of purposes and a lot of different paces. Again, a shoe I think the industry desperately needs, and one I'm really excited to run in. And what's really incredible about the Evo SL is that they've gotten the shoe to around 215 grams or about 7.5 ounces, and it's going to come in for about 150 US dollars. So you're going to get a very lightweight shoe that's going to be very durable for an amazing price. I mean, that's a great price for a shoe like this that's going to have all the performance to take you from easy to racing for a lot of people. But this does bring into question, why the Evo SL? Why isn't this the Boston 13? Or what about the Boston? Because the Boston has traditionally filled this role. Well, this kind of explains why we've seen zero leaks of a Boston 13. We've seen nothing about it. We've seen the Evo SL, again, it was called the Evo C. We saw various versions of it, but we've not seen a single Boston 13 leak or prototype or anything. Now, I'm not saying the Boston is going away, but if Adidas is launching the Adios Pro 4 side by side with the Evo SL, and this Evo SL, it's the new tempo trainer, has the Evo name, which is now very important for Adidas, that brings into question what the Boston is actually going to be. And if you watch the Believe in the Run podcast with Patrick, there's a section in there where Thomas asks about the Boston 13, and Patrick's response is interesting because he pauses, and the way he kind of deflects it and kind of doesn't say anything about it, but is kind of smiling about it, implies to me that there is going to be a new Boston, not till next year, 2025, but it's probably going to be a very different shoe than we've come to understand the Boston to date. Now, in many ways, the Evo SL makes more sense to be a Boston because it's closer to what the Boston used to be back in the Boston 9 and earlier days. It was a tempo trainer that didn't have a plate in it. Not that plates existed back then, but it was a more traditional feel shoe, did have a midfoot shank, and it was a shoe that you could do everything in, from easy running through racing. That feels like what the Evo SL actually is. So it's interesting Adidas is going back to a tempo trainer that's really meant to do that work in the same way. But again, it's interesting they called it the Evo. The Evo name is important. That means innovation for them, but I don't understand quite why it's here or why this shoe isn't called the Boston. But I think next year when we see whatever the plans are for the Boston, it may be a little bit more clear. But as it stands right now, the Evo SL, even though the name is a little confusing, I think is an exciting shoe. And to me, it's actually more exciting than the Adios Pro 4. Again, not that the Adios Pro 4 isn't going to be an amazing shoe. I cannot wait to run in it. But I think the Evo SL is just that much more interesting. And I think it's going to be a shoe that's going to be way more valuable to way more runners. So great on Adidas for really pushing innovation in this direction and really going with a plateless shoe for their primary tempo trainer. One last little detail from Patrick's podcast with Believe in the Run is that he did confirm there will be an update to the Takumi Sen. There is a Takumi Sen 11 coming, and it's probably coming at the end of the year, probably in December. I think we should see that release side by side with the Adios 9 officially, because those are going to be the shorter distance or more traditional racing flat shoes. And he also implied that the design update for the Takumi Sen 11 should be pretty drastic and feel a lot more like the Adios Pro 4 in the Evo SL, which again is even more exciting. Overall, really exciting stuff that's really broad and I think is going to tick a lot of boxes for a lot of runners from Adidas. Again, I think Adidas is really pushing the line forward, and I think the Adizero range now is really full featured, and any gaps that they previously had are now filled. And I think there's some other exciting things coming in 2025 because, again, Patrick sort of implied there's some other changes and other updates coming. So really exciting times for the Adidas Adizero range, and I cannot wait to run in these shoes. Now, I don't know when I'm going to get a pair because I seem to be the last one who gets anything, especially living here in Taiwan, but I will work on it. I will try to get a pair of these earlier than I could buying them at this store, but we'll see. As soon as I get them, I'll have my reviews on the channel, but that may not be for a while. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this type of content interesting, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.